Hey guys, before we get going today, I just wanted to throw a quick shout out to Thomas Duran. Thomas is our newest member on Patreon, and I can't tell you how much it means to have people reach out and support us in our mission to try and help us further the cause of child welfare. Thank you so much, Thomas. If anyone else would like to join Thomas in our mission of helping kids, you can do it at patreon.com/fostercarenation. And again, thanks a lot. It means the world to us, man. Foster Care Nation, listen up. This is
Foster Care and Unparalleled Journey.
Strength for the powerless, courage for the fearful, hope and healing for wounded hearts. Hello and welcome back to Foster Care, an Unparalleled Journey with Jason
and Amanda.
And today we have a guest for you whose name I looked at and I asked Amanda, how do you pronounce that? And we're not even going to try and pronounce it properly because
I'm not going to say that again.
My guess was closer, but I'm going to let her say her name so we don't mess it up.
Hello, Jason and Amanda. Thank you for having me on. My name is Nipunika.
Yeah, see, the accent is the one thing I got wrong, is where the accent was in that name. All right.
Well, welcome.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. We're talking to you because you have a foster care story. And these are the stories that I love to see, where someone has been through their story and is coming out the other side and looking to help people. Because, you know, we have our own story, and for the people who've heard our story, we've been through our own level of trauma and our own level of difficulties individually as kids, and then together as married and losing a kid and all the things we've gone through. And one of the things I've learned in this life is that when you go through hard things and you make it through, man, if you made it through and you don't share that with other people, you are just wasting your pain.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think that it's very important to help others because of helping others and giving back, but it's also an opportunity to heal yourself. And once you start to do that, you realize how true it is and how much your voice is needed to heal others, but also to heal yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm involved with a group of guys online in a dad's group that have taught me the power of being vulnerable in those moments. And that's one of the hardest things I had to learn how to do. And it's been one of the most impactful.
I would agree.
So tell us, how did you get involved with the foster care system?
So I was involved in the foster care system starting at the age of 7. And I entered the foster care system with my biological sister. And we entered the system because of our family home was very unsafe. We were being abused in multiple different ways, and it became a really unstable and toxic environment for us to be in.
Well, that sounds like good reasons to not be left in that place.
Yeah, you know, and it was definitely hard because, you know, so I'll backtrack. And I was born in Sri Lanka, and when I was 3 years old, my birth mother, who, you know, she did a lot of different things in Sri Lanka for jobs and stuff, but one of the things she did was make cakes for brides, you know, just make cakes in general. So it was a few days before my 3rd birthday, and she said, you know, I'm gonna go, I'll be right back, I'm gonna go make you a cake for your birthday. So, you know, I didn't think anything of it, but in reality, she was really just going to America. So it was definitely like a transition after a transition. And right when I got my mom back, there was so many elements to it, but she put us in an unsafe environment and we had to leave her again. So it was just one of the things that I learned early on, that my life was going to be, the constant thing in my life was going to be change. And entering foster care was very difficult because when you're young, all you know is your parents. And when you're young, you think your home is normal, and you think what you go through in that home is what everyone goes through. And it's not until you're taking that out of it that you realize that that wasn't normal, and that is not what a child should go through. So I think the transitions are always hard. And throughout my foster care journey, that's one thing that I've learned is how challenging transitions can be. And then later on, I realized how beautiful they can be. And one of the things I really want to give back with is ensuring that those transitions for other foster youth is, it's never going to be seamless, but to know that there's someone that's been in their shoes, there's someone listening, and there's someone that cares. And most importantly, that there's someone that's been there and has made it out and is successful and is trying their best, and they can too.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm going to say that, a lot of the kids we've had to come through our home were in that 3-4-year-old age range, maybe a little older, maybe a little younger. That's kind of my wheelhouse. Amanda will tell you I'm a 3-year-old at heart.
Yeah.
So I know 3-year-olds. I cannot imagine being 3 years old and having your mom just disappear.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely, it gave me a chance to be closer to my dad. And especially after my sister was taken, it was us against the world. And it's funny, and I write my book the same way, is and I think a lot of kids go through this, they find out things later on. So they have this idea of what they think and what their life was like and who that person was to them. And then they find out details later on. But how I remembered my dad versus who he really was totally different. So my dad to me was my happy place. He was kind, he was a good father. And then, I find out details later on about why that might not be true. And so it's important to really hold on to the good things about each situation. Like, yes, my mom left, and that was really, really hard for me. But every time I look back on the struggles that I've been through in life, there was always something there to give me hope. And that's not hard to, that's a hard thing to do. But it's an important thing to do in order to survive. You have to really hold on to those little bits of hope. And a lot of the advice that I have, I realize it's like, oh, that's, it's easy to say, it's hard to do. But when you realize that it's harder to hold on to the hurt than to hold on to hope, you realize that, maybe it's not harder.
Wow. Yeah, because you've been through some stuff, right? I mean, you've got a story with some stuff in it.
And that was and that's why I'm breaking my story down into little bits, because, I've done the whole, just buzz through it. And it's a lot for people to digest. And the reason that I can tell my story, and this is something that I'm working on, is I look back and I'm like, did that really happen? Is that really my story? So I kind of detached myself from it for a while. And I think it's a healthy thing to do for a period of time to heal the way that you need to. But it's also important to really go back and sit with it, knowing that you learned a lesson, or knowing that there was hope that came out of it. And I think when I was going through the foster care system, something that really helped me was that I would escape through art. And it's important to find something that lets you escape. So one of the things I've always said was, if I couldn't talk about it, I would dance about it. And dancing was something that really helped me. Every movement, I felt like I was in control of my body. I got to choose how to move. I got to choose the medium that I wanted to move with. And it was just a really powerful outlet for me. And traditional ways like therapy was not something that helped me for a very long time. I needed to find other forms, and that really did help to figure out an outlet for my resentment and my hurt so I can hold on to hope.
It sounds like holding on to hope is something that you've had to really work hard for.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, my mom, the woman that adopted me, she always refers to me as the phoenix. And I think that that's always been a symbol of my life. And I actually have a tattoo of, it's a symbol of strength, but it actually looks like the phoenix. And then in my birth mom's handwriting, it says, "And still I will rise and have victory," in Sinhalese, which is the language that I was born into. And she really reminded me that through the dark and through the ashes, you can still grow and you can still rise. And that's why I have a connection with the lily of the valley, because that's a flower that blooms in darkness. And, you know, it's so easy for people to say when a child has gone through hardship that they won't be able to bloom, that they're injured, or that they are never going to be successful. And I've used to hear the term, "Oh, she's successful for a foster kid." And I want to change that, because I'm successful for a person. I'm successful, period.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot right there for sure. Because I mean, everything from the way that people expect foster kids to
Mhm.
be seen or thought of, that's one thing. And I mean, let's be honest, there's some kids out there who have been hurt in a lot of ways that are going to take a lot of years to heal, and that's just part of that
Yeah.
process. But that doesn't mean that it limits every kid who's been through it. You mentioned you had a biological sister. Is she older than you, younger than you?
Yeah, so she's 4 years older than me. And, you know, for a very long time, she was the calm in my storm. And it really did, it helped to have someone there for you through the transitions. And then for a few years of my foster care journey, we were in separate homes. And I really learned to be my own independent individual person. And looking back at it, it was a hard change for me to make, but I think it was a very important one, because it did make me very independent, but it also made me trust myself. It made me trust that I have the capability to make decisions for my own life. So I know that that's one of the things that people struggle with, is like, oh, we don't want to separate these siblings. Um, and every person is unique, and every person has their own fingerprint. And so, you know, it varies from person to person. But for me, I felt like it was important for me to have my own journey through life, even at a young age.
So you said she came to the US before you, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
How long were you by yourself?
So 1 year without my mother, and my sister was there, and then 1 year without her. So it was 2 years total that I was by myself without my mom and my sister.
That's a scary thought.
It is a scary thought. Yes.
Yeah, just to have no idea. And then one day you're here and the next day you're
Yeah.
gone.
I mean,
No,
yeah,
no
it
time for
happens fast.
closure.
No closure, absolutely. And, you know, I know that my father has, my biological father has, you know, has his own family and his own kids now, and we've all kind of went our separate ways. But to have so many unknowns and to have so many doors that weren't closed, um, really does kind of set a tone of just heaviness that does follow you when you go through the window and when you go through other doors. But I think what's helped me deal with that aspect is to know that no matter what I go through and what path I decide to take, I'm the one that is going to travel down that path. So if I base my decisions on doors that weren't closed, or people that have chose to take a path without me eventually, or, you know, decisions that were made for them, then I have to just kind of take myself and say, this is the journey that I'm going on, and people will follow me or they won't. And when you do that, you stay true to yourself, and you stay true to the journey of healing that you're on.
Holy cow.
I know, it's a crazy story. This is what I'm writing a book, but it's taking a while because I call it a heal in progress, instead of a work in progress. But yeah, so it's a lot. And sometimes, this is the first time I've actually, talked about my story. I've mentioned it, I've talked about it with, close friends, but I've never done a public telling of my story before. So this is also kind of a learning process for me as well.
Wow. Well, for three, so you were 3 when your mom left, so you would have been 5 when you came into the US.
Yes.
That's a lot for a 5-year-old to process. And then to come to the US and be pushed into an orphanage.
Yeah, so I actually thought for a very long time that it was like a juvenile detention center. So I thought it was like other kids that have done bad stuff or that has gone through other things that are just there as kind of a punishment. And then I found out that it was an orphanage. And for me to think like, oh, those are bad kids, to those are kids that don't have parents and don't have a family, it was really something, another layer that I had to heal from and deal with quickly. And so that's the other thing. It's like, no matter how much you've healed and no matter how much you've been able to digest about your past and about the lessons that you've learned, there's always going to be things that pop up that you never thought would. And you have to take a look at your life and say, you know what, I worked so hard to be where I'm at now that I'm not going to let this thing that came up, this wave that's coming, to knock me down and make me stay down. Because it's okay to get knocked down, but it's not worth it to stay down. And that's part of why my book is called Oceans and Butterflies. So the oceans part comes from, I was born in Sri Lanka. My grandmother, when my sister was still there, she would put 2 chairs outside. Our house was right near the ocean, and we would fall asleep to the sound of ocean waves and the moon. And so the ocean was really always my happy place. I once drove 3 hours at like 2 a.m. to go to the ocean just to hear the waves. That's how much I love it. But it also taught me a lot of things. And what the ocean has taught me was that everything that happens in your life is like a wave. And there's always going to be another wave coming. And you can decide if you want to ride the wave out, let it take you down, or jump through it. And then you have to decide what you're going to do after that. And what I've learned is if you jump those waves enough, if you get the strength that you have left to get up and just keep jumping those waves, you'll look back and you'll say, that wave that's coming, I'm going to jump it. And when you do, you look back and you realize that that wave a few months ago, 2 years ago, would have taken me down. So it gets easier to have strength. It gets easier to jump the waves that you thought you didn't have the strength to do. And that's why the ocean part comes into it. And so the butterfly part of Oceans and Butterfly is when I was in foster care, one of my social workers gave me a card. And she gave me a card right around the time where one of my foster siblings that was in the same home as I was being adopted, and I wasn't. And I was in that home before this foster sibling. So she gave me a card, and I still have it. It was blue with white writing, and it said, just when the caterpillar thought the world was ending, it turned into a beautiful butterfly. So that was something that I've taken with me and has come back in circles in my life. And then when I met my partner, John, I, had a few hours with his mom when we first started dating. And I think like a few weeks later, she didn't know anything about me. She didn't know my, whole butterfly thing in my life, but she sent a card, and it was white with blue writing with the same exact quote. And in it, she said, "You two have something special. Always take care of each other." So, I mean, it was just one of those things that circled back in my life, and I have both of those cards. And that's why the butterfly is so important, and a symbol for my life. And, you know, I look back and I'm so thankful for the caterpillar, because that's where I learned my lessons. And that's why I knew I deserved the chance to spread my wings, and I deserved the chance to fly. And I think a lot of people get bogged down by being a caterpillar and by going through the struggles that they went through, that they don't have the strength to flap their wings, because a butterfly needs to practice flying before it does. And a lot of people don't get to that practice point.
I love that you bring that up, because if Amanda was to raise her sleeve over there,
Oh, does she have a butterfly?
well, not just the butterfly,
I
that
have the cocoon and some
Oh,
other.
really?
yeah, yeah, that there was a tattoo, and that was something that Amanda and our daughter really talked about a lot, was that whole process, because our oldest daughter, she came from a family placement, and and that was part of her story, and
Mhm.
we lost her several years ago to a nasty disease, but that was one of the tattoos that she has, along with the music of a song that was very important to her. But it has the chrysalis hanging off of it, and the butterfly. That whole butterfly story was really a part of their connection, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's awesome. And then, I think when parents find a way to connect with their child through other things in nature, like, butterfly, the phoenix, it really does help them deal with what they're going through, because you tell them that you understand, you tell them that other things have gone through it too. And when you look at a butterfly, all you see is grace, and all you see is them being beautiful and floating around, but you don't realize that they too have gone through struggle. So I think that's really beautiful. And that actually, I want that to be another tattoo, is a butterfly, but I'm not sure how or where I want it yet.
Well, we don't want to talk tattoos too much, because between the two of us, it would take us a long time to get over all those stories. Yeah, so we are people who proudly wear our tattoos, but every one of ours has some meanings and some
Mhm.
connections to the people in our
Symbolisms
life,
and
and yeah, yeah, and I think those are the stories that we carry with us for sure out into the world.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's beautiful. So how long were you in the orphanage before you ended up in an actual
yeah, I
foster
was gonna
home,
ask that.
or
So
did you go to your mom's house and then end up in a foster home?
yeah, so basically, I was in an orphanage. It was definitely less than a year. I'm not sure the exact time frame. But it was until, they got communication going that I did have actual parents here, or at least one, that my mom was here. So it took a little bit of communication, and I'm sure paperwork, that needed to be sorted out in order for me to be released into her care. So I remember I was in the orphanage, and then I remember, I was on a plane, and then I met my mom, and my sister was there. And then there was this new man that my mom married, who unfortunately was the person that brought a lot of the abuse and toxicness into our household. Um, and so I was reunited with them, and my mom had a brother in New York. So we went to New York first. And then eventually we made our way into Vermont, because there was a motel budget in that needed a front office manager and a housekeeper. So that's where my birth mom and her new husband eventually went, and that's why how we ended up in Vermont. And then, I was with them from like 5 to 7, and at 7 we went into the foster care system.
And what did that look like for you when you entered the foster care system?
I remember, a lot of stuff was happening, and school was finally starting to notice. And I remember it was Hawaiian Day at school, and we were having a huge assembly in the gym. And there was a counselor, I believe, was behind me, and she could tell something was wrong. So she asked me what was going on, and I said, my sister wasn't allowed to come to school today. And so they, did some digging, and they called the house, and they figured out, like, my stepdad wasn't letting her go to school. And I think there has been some kind of conversations, and when kids are wearing turtlenecks and long sleeves in the summer, they figured something was happening. And so that day, I usually wait in the playground and wait for the bus from the middle school to come, where my sister would get off, and then we would walk home together. And my homeroom teacher said, "You're going to go to the guidance counselor's office today instead of the playground to wait for your sister." And so I knew something was up. And I remember in the guidance counselor's office, there was a sandbox. And I was just playing in the sandbox. Until this day, I cannot play with sandboxes because it brings up that feeling and that memory and that anxiety that I had. So I was playing with a sandbox. There was a police officer. And the thing about adults that they don't realize is that kids are a sponge, and we may not look like we know what's going on, but we're absorbing everything around us. And so I knew something was going on, and I could hear them talking. And then, so I just knew that something was going to happen, something was changing. And that's a feeling that I get all the time now. And usually I'm right. And so they were like, your sister's in the lobby with her guidance counselor. Why don't you come out there? So I go out there, and we're waiting in the lobby, and we're looking out into the parking lot at the school. And we see this old couple come up, and the guidance counselors were basically like, "These are going to be your new parents now." And so we went with our first foster parents, and I remember just being devastated and not knowing what was going on or what was happening. That my birth mom, being who she is, quickly, I guess, made us a plate of food to bring with us. And so I had some of my mom's cooking in the first home on the first day. And that, I think, really helped me a lot. And that's how she expresses love. And it's definitely transferred over to me. And I love cooking, and I love showing my love through cooking. And that's definitely something I got from her. And a piece of advice that I will give foster parents is, every kid is different, and every kid will have different needs. But one thing that's universal is food. And it's their love of kind of healing people with providing food and providing value that way. So one thing, I've thought about being a foster parent a lot. And one thing that I would do as a foster parent if a new kid was coming into my home was ask, the social worker, what is their favorite kind of food, and already have that made for the first night. And along with that, another piece of advice that I would give is, yes, a kid is coming into your home, and you're going to do your best to really incorporate them into your family. But it's also important to make sure they feel like they have a voice. So for an example, if you have a chore chart that you have for your family, instead of just, adding their name to it, which they will see as like a family picture to them, right? Let them choose what color they want to be. And so they know, like, we're incorporating you into our family. There are rules, there are things you have to do, but you'll always have a voice, and we want you to feel included. And that means you get to pick the color that your name is going to be on the chart, or we made your favorite food because we want you to know that we want you to be, comfortable here. But we do sit at the table and we eat as a family. So it's really like those balances of making sure it's not them feeling like they have to totally change the way they live, but that they have a voice in how they're going to fit into your family and your rules.
You mentioned food. We have done a lot with food over the years for different kids, and
Yeah.
Amanda will speak to the amazingness of some of the creations I've come up with.
Dog,
Chili
dog, tater tot pizza.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, my John would be all over that.
I was the king of the world that night.
Yeah, see, food is a universal language,
Yep.
and it's a and it's funny because another thing that I teach and try to portray is to listen to those cliches that you hear over and over again, because you know what, they're cliches for a reason. People find them to be true to so many people for a reason, and when you start listening to them, you can see how they apply into your life or how they don't. And they have really helped me to figure out how I fit into the world with other people and how I'm different from it. So, when it comes to foster parenting and advice, it's like just listen to those cliches because they're true.
Yeah, the cliches come from somewhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure, for sure. Um, well, and now were you in any other foster homes, or was that did
Mm,
that end up being your?
no, no. So I we definitely moved around a lot. So my sister and I were together through, let me see, one, two, three homes we were together. And then she was we actually got reunited back with our birth mother, and by that point she had our half brother, who is my world. I love him so much. But we got reunited back with her, and one of the things that I've had to deal with and learn is that she was also in an abusive relationship. So that was something that was hard for her to get away from. So she made choices that, a mother should not make, like leaving us to go see my brother's dad. And so, there was other stuff that happened where she was used to the culture in Sri Lanka where it is okay to be violent to your kids or hate your kids. So she was still kind of trying to learn that that was not okay. And she made mistakes. And so we actually re entered the foster care system. And when we did, we went to a family in the same town that we were in. And I think, this is one of the lessons that I learned that I use now in my professional life is it started out as a survival tactic that I need to know who a person is within minutes or within hours of being in someone's home in order to survive. And so now it's kind of developed into this gift. And so when we went into that foster home after being reunited with my mom for a very short period of time, I knew that this home wasn't the white picket fence that they were portraying to be. And so I spoke up about it and I said, I don't want to be in this home. And I think my sister was so wrapped up in wanting that life and in wanting a stable home and in wanting to be understood that she didn't see it. And so I remember she came to my door and she said, this is my family and this is my home. If you want to leave, you can, but I'm staying here. And I remember that night I had this dream and I still remember it vividly. It was in front of the house that we were in currently and at that time. And it was a crossroad. And I saw, the home that they were going to put me in if I didn't want to stay there. I saw the home that my sister was in and the family there standing there with her. I saw my brother and my mom, and then I saw me right in the middle. And it was one of the hardest decisions that I had to make. Not because I didn't know what choice to make, because I knew I didn't want to be there, but because I knew my sister wasn't going with me. And I knew that my sister found her family and I would have to find my family on my own. So, I went into that foster home and that it was a whole nother layer of hurt. And that's, I think, when my strength was harder to find. And my strength kind of went away. And I was definitely, very suicidal. I was having a hard time kind of coping with all the changes around me. And I think the hardest part was that the change I made was on my own. And the change I made was purely my choice and not things that happened to me. Granted, the choice that I was forced to make was because of what's happened to me before, but I made the choice to be separate from my sister. And looking back at it, I'm glad I did, because like I've said before, it taught me to be independent and taught me to be my own person. But then it was just the kind of the first choice that I ever got to make as my own individual person. And I was having a hard time dealing with it. And I, got a taste of being back with my mom, and I was so happy. And my little brother was there. And then to be separated from her a second time, and then immediately after that to be separated from my sister, it was just a lot to deal with at once. And I think that was probably the hardest point of being a caterpillar then, was that I was just fighting against myself, and I didn't have the right support system. I didn't have the right family to help me through that. And there's a lot of brokenness in the system, and that's why I think foster parents are so important, because you can be the glue that mends those broken cracks in the system. And unfortunately, these foster parents weren't. And so when I was going through a hard time and I was suicidal, instead of getting me the true help I needed, they sent me away to soccer camp for 2 weeks by myself. And so, it was support that I didn't need, or it was support that wasn't needed because it wasn't the right support. And I don't know who or why thought it would be good to send a suicidal teen to live by herself for 2 weeks at a soccer camp, but that's what they did. And so there's just so many injustices that I went through being hurt or being an injured foster child that I still struggle with, but it made me hell of a lot stronger. And instead of holding on to the hurt and the bitterness, because all it's going to do is hurt you at the end, I learned to say, you know what, if I went through that, it's the waves. If I went through that wave, then there's nothing that can stop me. And there's nothing that will hold me down for too long.
Yeah, that's a lot to go through, for especially when you're dealing with a teen dealing with suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
That's a tough spot. We've been through that world with some kids in our past as well. And as far as I can tell, if anybody listening knows that I'm wrong here, please feel free to give me the correct answer. But I don't believe I know many teens going through that there's a real set answer for. That's just a challenge for every one of them that's unique and different. And
Yeah.
especially a kid who's gone through as many things that you had at a young age, I can only imagine that the attachment, your attachment abilities at that age was probably fairly difficult, learning to attach to people, because you'd had so many different caregivers at that point.
Absolutely. And it's like, what is my constant? My constant was change. And when that's your constant, that becomes a lot to hold on to, and it becomes a lot to grow from. And so I think what happened for me, it got to the point where I had this much hope for such a long period of time. And then the troubles and the hurt just kept getting bigger and bigger, and it overgrew the hope that I had. And so that's when I got into the dark space. And that's when I had suicidal ideation, is because I no longer had something to hold on to. There was no longer any hope because the hurt was overpowered. And there wasn't someone there to show me that there is the light, there is hope at the end, and there is success, that there is something for you to hold on to and look forward to. Because at that point, I didn't have anyone, and I truly, truly felt like I was alone. And when you feel isolation, you don't feel worth. And isolation is different than being alone and being comfortable being alone. Isolation feels like you don't have a choice but to be alone. And I think that was the factor and the element that was different in how I learned to overcome it, is because I felt isolated, and I didn't feel like I had a choice but to be isolated. I felt like I was misunderstood. No one truly got what I was going through. And then the whole, and I think a lot of parents struggle with this, because I know it is a practice and it is something that they've been told to do, is almost punish your kid for being, having suicidal ideation and having those thoughts, that they're bad to have them. And it's not, instead of figuring out why are you having them, why do you feel like this, it's you shouldn't, and there's no other way out. So it's either don't have these thoughts, or if you do, you're bad, and that's it. There's no, you have these thoughts, but these are the different paths you can take instead of the path that you think you have to take. And so, it's important to just reassure that what you're feeling right now is valid, and you have every right to feel down, you have every right to be hurt, but there is another way out, and I love you enough to show you that there's another way out.
You mentioned losing connections with your mom so many times. I
Mm.
can only imagine that you probably had one of those great big gaping mother wounds for a lot of
Mm.
years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a part of me was so attached to my mother, because it's sad, because she, deep down she is kind, she just doesn't know any better, and she's so set in her ways that it's sad, because it's ruining so much around her life. And to me, it's like, when I love someone and I care for someone, I'm loyal and I will do anything for you. But it got to the point where I had to realize that in order for me to not follow in my mom's footsteps, and in order for me to ensure that I can give the love that I want to give to other people in my life, I have to create some distance between her and I, to ensure that I can heal. And eventually, maybe I can help her after I've healed. But two broken people can't heal each other, um, when it's that broken. And so it was definitely a hurt that I felt for a very long time. And it was also, something I've dealt with. Like, I watch TV shows where there's the strong bond between a mother and a daughter. And I've always yearned for that. And I've always wanted that. And for the longest time, it's like, oh, I missed out on that and I didn't have that. But now I look at it as, I can't wait to have that with, a foster child I have, or one of my own kids, one of my biological kids, in the future. So it's definitely, instead of saying, oh, poor me, it's, you know what, now I know what I don't want to be like as a parent, or now I know what I am looking forward to being as a parent, and what is important. So I've definitely learned a lot of lessons about the kind of parenting that I want to ensure and practice when I have my own kids.
Oh yeah, yeah. Amanda's has some issues with her mom that she grew through, and me and my mom don't have a terribly close relationship. It's one of those things that it creates a real difficult place for a lot of kids, especially as you get into the world, and you eventually figure out that your life is affected by that.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing that and being willing to work through it is two different things. And if everybody hears, listening and hears any noise now, we just had a visitor show up. We have a new co-host.
Yeah.
He's Mr. Scotty is our godson, and he comes over in the afternoons, and forgot what time he was coming over today. So today you'll probably get to hear Scotty on the podcast. Don't worry, he doesn't say much.
No worries. Welcome.
Especially while he has some little puffs in his hands. He's doesn't say much there.
Oh, that's awesome. He's cute. Well, more the merrier.
I'm curious. You mentioned about as you're going through your journey, how you really lost hope.
Mm.
Where did you find your hope at?
I found it in my future self. I found it in the little girl that I was. So, it's the cliche saying, like, you do it for the little girl that needed you, be the person you needed when you were younger. And that's really where I found my hope. And it was because I wanted to prove myself wrong. And when I didn't have hope, that's the person I wanted to prove wrong, because I didn't think that I could find that ever again. And I did. And I proved that little girl wrong. But at the same time, I also healed her, because at that point of not seeing any hope or not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, she never thought she could see it again. So when I eventually did find it, by wanting to prove my younger self wrong, I also healed my younger self. And so it's one of those things. It's like you can't have one without the other. So if I never found that hope, I never would have healed. And one of the things I think about now is, when I feel like, it's okay for me to relax and it's okay for me to take the eye off the ball and I'm doing great, I slowly start to slip back into that pit of hopelessness. And I remind myself how bad it felt. And then I work hard so I don't have to feel that again. And it's not, and for a longest time, and I think everyone does need to go through this, if you truly want to heal and work on yourself, it feels like you're running a race. And when you run a race without healing or training yourself, you get exhausted, you get winded, and you stop. And then everyone else passes you and you just feel like you're going backwards. And when you don't think of it as a race, but you think of it as training and healing, you're able to have the quantity to keep going. You're able to have the momentum to keep going. And one of the stories that I think of is the first time I ever ran. I think it was a 3K or 5K. It's the first time I ever ran a race, and I didn't do much training for it. And I, when it started, I was the first one. I was right behind the cop car and I was running as fast as I could. And I was in first place for half the race. And then I started to slow down because I was winded and I didn't train and I didn't have the strength to keep going. And so I stopped and started walking and everyone passed me. And, the lesson that I learned was that no one remembers the person that was first for most of the race. They remember the person that finished first. And that's a lesson that I learned earlier on in life. And I didn't realize I learned it till I looked back on that moment. And I realized, it's not important if you're the first one to go. It's important that you have the courage and the strength to keep going and to finish. And so that's how I look at it. It's like, I may not be as fast as someone else in my journey, but I'm training and I'm healing so I can finish. And that's what's important.
Wow. That's a lot of wisdom to be dropped.
From a race, right?
Yeah.
I think I was 11.
But you also, you had more than one race written in that story, I think.
Absolutely.
So I know that you were in foster care for a while and you were eventually adopted as well. And at 15, you said?
Yeah, so I was adopted at 15. And, my sister, I was in this home first, in the home that I was adopted into. And my sister was in the family that she picked and said, this is my family. And then that didn't work out. What I said and what I saw in these parents in that home came to be true. And so she needed a place to go. And at that point, I really was, I learned to be my own person. I learned to be independent. I learned to live without her. And so it was really hard to have her come in to that family for me. It was something that I struggled with and dealt with. And at the time I wasn't mature enough. And at the time I didn't have the words to express why I was so hurt that she was coming into the family. Because, anyone would look at it and be like, oh my God, your sister's in the same family as you. That's so great. That must be amazing. But for me, it was kind of the opposite. And I think what hurt me the most was, because she was about to age out, or she, was aging out at that point of foster care, she was adopted first. And so that was something that I, honestly still struggle with. And, I never understood, like, why can't you fill out the same paperwork at the same time? But she was adopted first, and then I was adopted after her, even though I was in the family first, before my sister. So that was something I struggled with and dealt with. But basically, how I found this family was, after, I think, my fifth or sixth home, I went into this town and I was with a temporary foster parent, and she had the idea of adopting a little baby and not a teenager with more problems than she knew what to do with. But when I entered that new school system, I met this girl named Hannah, and we became best friends, and we became really close. And she knew how hard I was from and how much I didn't like the home that I was in currently. And so basically, I went over for a sleepover and I never left. And my mom, she is pretty well versed in child advocacy in that industry. She was the president of the Foster Care and Adoption Association of New England for 5 years. She was a director at a home for young adults or teenagers that are pregnant and need direction and help. And now she is an associate director for Children and Family Futures. So she's kind of had a lot of this under her belt, and all four of her kids were made her kids through adoption. So it was really the best home that I could be in. And she taught me a lot about who to be as a mom and who to be as a person. So I'm very thankful. And I definitely was still dealing with a lot when I went into her home. And then my sister entering that home really created a lot of things that I had to deal with. And so I separated myself from that home around the age of 16, 17, because I just didn't know how to live life with my sister around again, let alone being in the same house. And so I never really got to fully have that mother-daughter bond that I've always dreamed of, and the home that I always wanted for myself. But now that I'm a lot mature and I'm able to take accountability for my actions, and I'm able to express why I'm hurt and why I may have acted the way that I did, I'm definitely able to repair a little bit of that relationship with everyone around me that I want to repair. And so we're slowly getting that mother-daughter bond back, but it's definitely something that, if there's one thing that I regret, it's letting the hurt that I had from my sister and the decision that she made to pick a different family over her own sister get in the way of me having a bond with the family that chose to adopt me. So that, if I have any regrets, definitely that. But I know that nothing is permanent and there's always a way to fix something. And no matter how hopeless it may seem, no matter how hopeless the caterpillar feels, they're always going to have a new world, and they're always going to be able to flap their wings and fly away and figure out a way to make it work. And so that's how I find hope in every situation.
That's amazing. Now, we haven't really discussed this at all, but just taking one look at you, I'm going to say you do not appear to have even considered what your 40s are going to be like yet. So how old are you now?
I'm 23.
23. Okay. So this wasn't that many years ago for you.
Yeah.
Wow. And you've come to a point of some real wisdom and deep thought processes for being 23, especially because, I remember the 23-year-old me, and he was kind of an idiot.
Mm.
I don't know if that's the same way for everybody else out there listening, but for me, 23 was not an age of much wisdom. And it sounds like you've really gained a lot of perspective and some knowledge and wisdom and are seeking that wisdom out of your own life through these
Yeah.
hard places.
Yeah, I think one of the things that helped me was going through cognitive processing therapy. And why that was really helpful was I was able to identify why I felt the way I did. And I realized that it's because I didn't want to fit into stereotypes. And so I would rebel. And there's a good way to rebel, and then there's a bad way to rebel. Let me rephrase that. There's a socially acceptable way to rebel. And then there's the destruction, the self-destruction way to rebel. And so I decided to flip the script and rebel in a way of proving my younger self and other people and the stereotypes wrong. And that I think that at the end of the day is like truly what drives me.
Well, there could be a lot worse things driving you because this has driven you to a place where you're really able to reach out and help other people. And I know that you're looking at beginning your own podcast. Belonging Starts Here is going to be the name, correct?
Yes.
And so I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there because I know we have a lot of listeners who listen in who are from all aspects of the foster care system. And I know that you mentioned wanting to be able to talk to some former foster alumni. And
Yeah.
so if anybody wants to be able to share their story, how could they get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would. So please reach out to me at info at the Nika, which is Nika brand.com. And I wanted to start this podcast called Belonging Starts Here because I wanted to show the world and other people that have been through hardship or trauma or foster care, they can be successful too. And I look at a lot of the statistics and I look at a lot of the stereotypes and the connotation that's perceived in media around foster children. And I know that it's not true of who we can be and who we are if we're given the right resources. And so I want to be able to share those stories. I want them to feel like we belong in the world of what people consider successful or what you consider successful. And it's also to show other children that are in foster care currently that there's someone out there that has been in their shoes and that they've made it out. And you know what? I hope I can inspire you to make it out too, because you deserve it. Your younger self deserves it. And your future family and your future relationships deserve it. And one of my methods that I use so I have a marketing and business brand development business called the Nika brand, and I created a marketing and thought method called the fingerprint method. And I created it because we all have our unique fingerprint. And once you figure out what your fingerprint is, you're able to create an impression on others, and you're able to create an impression on people that might need to have your impression, might need to hear your story. And so I want to take other fingerprints of other foster care alumni and make an impression in others, but also figure out what part of our fingerprint, other than going through the foster care system, kind of connects us together. Because I feel like, like with us, it was the butterfly theory, and it was, that was something that you guys connected to with me. I feel like there's other things that kind of thread through the lessons everyone has learned. I feel like that there's something there that connects us all, a lesson that we learned. from going through the same journey or a similar journey.
I don't think there's much I can add to that. I think you hit the nail right on the head there for sure.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about it. But yeah, so please, if anyone's listening, I would, you just even have a chat, or if there's anything I can talk to you about, or you need just a listening ear or some advice, I'd be more than happy to speak with you. So please feel free to reach out. And one of the great things about having a unique name is if you just look me up by my name, I'll be the first person to pop up on any social media platform. So if you don't want to reach out through email, please reach out another way, and I would be happy to speak with you.
Yes, I do have to say you are the first Nipunika I've ever found in my life.
I believe it.
Well, I want to thank you for coming here and sharing your story today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Absolutely.
And to
Yeah,
hear from
thank you so
somebody
much.
who's really changed their life and taken those struggles and built their strength from the ashes of their former life.
Thank you. Yeah, and I, one of the things I want to make clear is that I wasn't always this person that's speaking the voice that you're hearing right now. I've definitely listened to the song "Pray for You" by Aaron Lowenstein, I think it is, and thought of a few people that I would want to play that song to. And I was definitely bitter, and I've gone through anger and resentment, but it didn't get me anywhere but more anger and resentment. And so I really know that it's hard when you're in that space to you might even be rolling your eyes at me and saying she doesn't, she has no idea what I'm going through. But when you're in that space, it is hard to see the other side, but there is another side. And that's why it's a cliche, and that's why you always hear it. And figure out a way for you to get there, and figure out what makes you hopeful.
Okay, Foster Care Nation, thank you for listening to Nipunika's story. Now take her knowledge and wisdom to heart so you can create love and healing in your family and community. Be sure to come back next week. We have new episodes every Tuesday. If you'd like to share your story as a guest, you can reach us at fostercareuj@gmail.com. You can connect with other like-minded people on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/fostercareuj. And don't forget, we have a Patreon where you can support our mission for as little as $5 a month. It's at patreon.com/fostercarenation. The links to everything are in the show notes, or on your podcast player, or at fostercarenation.com. And as always,
You are so super awesome. I think you guys are cool. Yeah. Thank you for listening. Thanks.